And welcome to Football Game Plan's Fantasy Football Starting Lineup. I'm Emery Hunt, the czar of the playbook. That's Chris James. Follow him at CJ Florida9. I'm at FBall Game Plan. Subscribe on YouTube to youtube.com/Football Game Plan. That's the Football Game Plan Network, as well as on iTunes, the Football Game Plan Podcast, and leave us a 5-star rating. Chris, it is week 13 in the NFL. We are flying through the 2020 season that at one point we thought was not going to happen, but here we are. Games been moved around. We're still on pace to end on time. But as far as people's fantasy football season is concerned, some people are in dire straits and they need a win. That's why we always like to start off our show with waiver wire pickups. Now, looking at the quarterback position, one guy that was able to get a win last week in New York, where he played once before, Ryan Fitzpatrick.
Yeah, and I feel like this is a game where Ryan Fitzpatrick is going to do two things, right? He's playing against Cincinnati. You know, they're having their struggles, but also he wants to prove some points. So this is a chance for him to really go out there, sling the ball around the yard, and they're having troubles with their running back core right now. So that can also put more pressure on the veteran to put up some good numbers for you this week, especially if you need a replacement for Tom Brady. Then you look at Derek Carr. Last week, there was nothing to be said except there's always that one game each year where an opponent that's way better on paper gets smacked in the mouth by someone else. I think the Dolphins did it a few years ago to the Steelers, and no one expected it. So this could be a bounce-back game for him. He gets to play the Jets, which is usually the gift that keeps on giving. And in the final quarterback, this one is kind of I think that he's been planning for this since they were out, and that's going to be Drew Lock against Kansas City. They're going to have to put up points. Again, knowing that their quarterback room was affected, they probably moved on to some extent to start doing a little work with Kansas City. I think that he can probably put up some numbers in this game because they're going to be needed considering what Kansas City is.
Especially with that secondary, man. They've quietly been giving up some big plays on the back end, and this is the type of game that's tailor-made for Locke to go off and eat. In the running back position, it's funny because when you look at the position now, even though we're at week 13, I feel like there's still some value out there on the waiver wire.
Absolutely, especially in a season like this. You alluded to it earlier with COVID going on and some other things. This is the week that you want to get things set up for even the playoff run once you get there. Two of these guys are injury-based more than anything, and that's going to be Devante Booker. First up, Jacobs had what looked like a pretty nasty injury that might not end up being too serious, but put Booker on your roster because you never know. Maybe they hold him out this week figuring it's the Jets and they can win without him. Look at another guy, James White, 2 touchdowns last week. Now they're playing the Chargers. This is a game where I think they're going to have to put the ball in the air more. And Damian Harris just does not have any value in the passing game. So James White might be able to do some things for you. And the final guy is Alexander Madison. Another injury to a stud running back. Yes, when Madison had the chance the first time he did earlier this season via injury, he didn't show out. But that doesn't mean he's going to do it again. Pick him up just in case Dalvin Cooks out of your lineup this week.
Now, I want to ask you, you went to Florida, you're down there in Florida now, so you saw a lot of Madison. What was your thoughts on him coming out of college? Did you foresee him being someone like this, kind of like a Dalvin Cook clone, almost?
I don't want to use this description, but he was a hedgehog runner to me, a guy who can bounce in and out of holes, had quickness that you didn't expect, and ran with a little power behind him. So did I see this being possible? Yes, to some extent once I got exposed to him, but it was almost amazing for them to bring him in, and he almost looks exactly like Dalvin Cook when he gets out there and runs the ball when he gets an opportunity.
Yeah, if you're not paying attention, you look quickly, and that's, you think, man, okay, Dalvin's getting another carry, but it's Madison. But at wide receiver, we saw some guys just pop up on the radar this past weekend, and now there's created a market for them on the waiver wire. So who's some of the guys that you're targeting?
And this guy could actually end up having a pretty good stretch to end the season. Kiki Cutie, a top 5 caliber wide receiver in fantasy, and Will Fuller goes down for getting popped for PEDs, unfortunately. Kiki Cutie is going to come in, I think now with they left or parted ways, I should say, with Kenny Stills. So Cutie's the next man up. Now they got Denzel Mims. They're going to keep getting him the ball, taking some of that volume from early in the season away from Jamison Crowder. And the final guy is a guy who is the ultimate boomer bust player. That's Gabriel Davis. He'll have 0 points one week and 21 the next week. So he could be a good pickup this week if you know that you need to get a big game, because this is the type of guy that can do it.
Listen, before we move on to the tight end position, let's backtrack a little bit and talk about Will Fuller and that Texan situation, because he gets popped for PEDs. I was like, dang, he was healthy all year. Like that makes sense, right? Then you saw Bradley Roby come out, get popped for PEDs. Like, dang, he was playing well this season. That makes sense. Then you see who's the strength and conditioning coach. Then it all makes sense.
Ryan Cush, hey, point A to point B, get you to point C. All the sense was made there.
Exactly. All right. At tight end, you only got one guy this week on the waiver wire. Who it is?
And this is Kyle Rudolph. Listen, tight end has been a quote-unquote wasteland this year. Everyone's playing that's of relevance pretty much, except Gronk is out after having a pretty good game. Kyle Rudolph's starting to get more targets. They're starting to throw the ball around a little bit more. And honestly, in a game like this, they might take some of the pressure off of Dalvin Cook if he does end up playing. And they'll pass the ball a little bit more. And this is perfectly tailor-made for Kyle Rudolph since they don't the Jacksonville Jaguars refuse to cover any tight end, period. Just they don't.
And listen, we've seen defenses and special teams really have a ton of success, especially this year. I feel like we're seeing more defensive touchdowns, more interceptions, more fumbles, more special teams, big plays like returns, whether it's onside kicks or guys returning back touchdowns on punt returns, kickoff returns. So we're seeing a lot of defensive special teams winning you games from week to week. So who are some of those teams that you're focused on this week on the waiver wire?
Funny enough, Kyle Rudolph was involved in a game where they had back-to-back defensive snaps that went for defensive touchdowns to Jeremy Chin, which is just hilarious to me. But this week, there's some good matchups for defenses that are on the waiver wire. You got the Raiders. They want to prove a point after getting kind of pushed around last week. They get the Jets, so they have a chance to prove it. Another one, the Vikings against the Jaguars. Listen, that game should go the direction of the Vikings, and I think their defense tries to have it as a get-right game against a guy like Mike Glennon. And then the Seattle Seahawks against the Giants. Confluence of new quarterback, defense playing better. So this is, if you didn't pick Seattle up last week when you were instructed to, now if they're still on your waiver wire, go get them. They have a great schedule.
Very good schedule, man. That definitely, kind of lends to them, especially with the Rams faltering. Week to week, you don't know what you're going to get. Seahawks could make a run and steal that division away from both LA and Arizona. And to be honest, San Francisco is still the fly in the ointment. So, yeah, absolutely. And you see what's happening, out there now with Carlos Dunlap and all those guys out there making plays for Seattle. So Chris got you right on the waiver wire. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about some players that you should keep an eye on. Get his thoughts on, because Chris does a great job diving into the film room and keeping an eye on what's happening week to week in the NFL, especially going back to some guys that he saw out there in college. So keep it locked here. We'll be back on Football Game Plan's Fantasy Football Starting Lineup.
Well, the game of football has taught me so many things, man. Now, think about the huddle we have right now, right? I tell people this all the time. There's a reason why they call it a huddle. People have been huddling all their lives, trying to find ways to enhance each other's lives. The great teams do that all the time. The great teams do that. The better the huddle, the better the team. And so it's simple, man, how if you huddle for all the right reasons, we wouldn't have Ferguson. We wouldn't have some of the challenges that we have in our society. But as we all know, there's always a moment when somebody doesn't belong in the huddle. And yet we have to continue to move on. We got to continue to play. So the game of life, man, is always starting with a huddle. And for me, I'm lucky enough to know that, by the graces of God, man, it's been a nice huddle. It's been a nice huddle. And if I just keep making sure that he's in front of me, I'm going to be all right.
And welcome back to Football Game Plan's Fantasy Football Starting Lineup. Emory Hunt, the czar of the playbook. Chris James at CJ Florida 9. Go ahead and smash that follow button on Twitter. Chris is a great follow, great football mind, which is why I have some questions for Chris in this second segment. And we're going to start in Jacksonville, because I feel like every week Jacksonville does something that ties you, and you're like, man, you know what? Whoever steps in at quarterback legitimately will have some weapons. This week, it was Colin Johnson, the tall wide receiver out of Texas, who we saw down at the Senior Bowl. So what are your thoughts on Colin Johnson and what he did last week, and what you can predict or project for him moving forward. It may not be this year, but let's say whatever you see this year or in 2021.
Sure. So one thing that was kind of interesting was you had a quarterback change this week. Mike Glennon. Maybe he's worked a little bit more with Colin Johnson. So just something to look out for. I had the opportunity to speak to him at the Combine, little video with him. And we discussed great body control for a bigger body receiver. While he's not a blazer, gets open. And he has a wide catch radius, and he makes catches. So a professional quarterback, which Mike Glennon has been, trust guys like that. So look who got peppered. Ended up with, I think he had like 94 and a touchdown. So it's someone that you can stash away, especially if you have a dynasty play. And the talent is there, and he might have an expanded role next season.
Yeah, he's their biggest wide receiver on the roster, and they're going to get him back. They're going to get Chenault back at some point. They got Keelan Cole. They got some dudes, man, and they got James Robinson in the backfield if they get a healthy Raquel Armstead back from COVID next year. Jacksonville is sneaky talented on both sides of the ball. They just need a quarterback.
It's not to go too far off topic, but this happens all the time. Several years ago, it was San Francisco. Right before that, it was Jacksonville before. They're right next to turn the corner. It's just the production on the field doesn't say it yet, but you're right. Once they get their quarterback situation figured out, they could be a team to challenge for a playoff spot.
Now, speaking of quarterback situation getting figured out, we look at Philadelphia and what happened this past week when they lost to Seattle. We know Carson Wentz has not been good this season, but when you look at Jalen Hurts getting a little bit more reps with the first team, or they let him throw more or be on the field without Carson Wentz, he only had 2 snaps, I believe, 3 snaps this past week against Seattle, but there's going to be a push for him starting. Now, I already tweeted out that, the contract for Carson Wentz will basically say there will be no starting Jalen Hurts anytime soon, at least in the next year. So if there were to start Jalen Hurts, what do you see from him? What did you see from him out of college? And why do you feel like, if he can start, he can be an upgrade at that position, but what also would it mean for everyone around him?
Sure. So I'll start with, don't think Jalen should start right now because some of the issues Carson Wentz is having, it's going to exacerbate against a rookie. But if they do start him, here's what I think could happen. There's clearly a disconnect between Doug Peterson and his quarterback Carson Wentz, whether it's Carson changing plays or whatever it may be. But there's a disconnect. I think if he has the rookie start, you'll see a change where the running backs might actually get the ball, the running game might be improved, and quietly some of those wide receivers that are talented when you get the ball in their hands, a Jalen Reagor, might actually have an uptick in production as well because they'll do more quick passes, a lot of motion stuff that they have seemed to leave out of their playbook with Carson Wentz currently this season. The biggest detriment if we were to have Jalen Hurts start is the production to the tight ends. Carson Wentz loves those guys. I don't think Jalen Hurts would be functioning with them in the middle of the field. They would do more stuff again, more run-heavy stuff, and giving him one-on-one opportunities to the exterior because that's an easier pass for a guy with a fairly strong arm in Jalen Hurts.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see, man, because we've seen this before with Philadelphia. They bash a receiver goes elsewhere, receiver dominates because receiver is actually good, and quarterback is actually bad.
Yeah, and Carson Wentz it's not a lack of talent. Something's wrong in there. Mentally, he's got to get that figured out because he was actually a good quarterback at one point. Right now, he is not.
Yeah, we see it a lot with quarterbacks. They get gunshot, they get shell-shocked, they get in their own heads. We saw with Alex Smith when he was in San Francisco, early part of his career when he, got benched, going back and forth with Sean Hill, back and forth with JT O'Sullivan, and then Harbaugh came in. They got right, he got right, and got better, and then they went ahead with Kaepernick. So we've seen guys overcome it, but you're right, Wentz isn't terrible like he doesn't have skill. But I just hate how Philly is blaming all of these receivers as if they're not talented. Like J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, I guarantee if he played for Seattle, he'd be more of a target than David Moore is, in my opinion.
That is, yeah.
Exactly. So they was like, oh, we should have DK Metcalf. No, you'd be blaming him too. So like you'd be mad at him, but it's interesting to see how the dynamic goes, but I'm glad you were able to explain the Jalen Hurts out of it. Now, staying in that division, Daniel Jones had 3 straight games of no turning the ball over, but the Giants can't have nice things because Daniel Jones gets hurt. And now Colt McCoy still in the league and back in the starting lineup. But what does Colt McCoy starting mean for the team and for the targets around him from a fantasy perspective?
And the Daniel Jones thing, again, to your point, 3 straight games are looking pretty solid as a quarterback. So it makes me a little sad that he had to go down. What does this mean to all the pass catchers on that team and how the team looks? Colt McCoy, much like a comment I made earlier, is a professional quarterback. He's hung around for a long time. He's not going to try to drive the ball down the field. What this actually does for your exterior receivers, I think it is a detriment to them because he's more comfortable with quicker stuff, and it's probably an uptick in production for Evan Ingram, to be honest. Getting the ball out quick to him from that slot position or even lined up as a tight end. They've already been peppering him with targets, but for some reason, the catch rate was low. I think Colt McCoy will help him have big games down the stretch. Again, especially Darius Slayton, there's going to be virtually no value for that young man unless they get design runs for him because that's not Colt McCoy's game. And you're going to see more stuff with the run game, just a lot out of the backfield to a guy like Will Gallman or whoever's going to play back there. That's just what Colt McCoy does. He did that at Texas, to be honest. So he is what he is, and you know what you're getting out of him. And unfortunately, that's going to bring down the values of a guy like Darius Slayton and the value of a guy like Sterling Shepard.
What about a guy like Golden Tate? Because he has been very vocal with this offense.
It's actually going to bring down his value too, because even though Golden Tate should be used more as that hybrid kind of, they use Deebo Samuel's running back receiver, his best thing is winning contested catches down the field. He's not going to get those opportunities with Colt McCoy unless it's at the end of the game and he's forced to, because that's not Colt McCoy's game.
It's going to be interesting to see, and Chris breaking down some interesting questions with a few players that are going to be getting a prominent role as the season rolls along. So we'll step aside once again, be back with more Football Game Plans, Fantasy Football starting lineup.
I love football. I cannot get enough of football. I watch it on every level.
The emotional release, whether it's an exciting play that gets you all jacked up and juiced, or whether it's the fact that you're able to pour everything you have, whatever frustration you had that week, you can put into that first kickoff coverage, that first block that you have, whatever it might be.
And I couldn't think of anything better to do to fill that void that you have as a football player than to get into coaching.
You get a chance to release a lot of emotion that you otherwise have no place to release. There's nothing else like that.
Again, the relationships you build and the people you're around and watching the guys compete, not just on the football field, but in life after they get done playing. It's just an amazing game.
Football Game Plan is brought to you in part by Financial Coaching LLC, Investment, Retirement, Security. Stewardship Credit. Financial growth is in your hands. StewardshipCredit.com. Adrienne Marie Photo, photographer, writer, management. AdrienneMariePhotography.com. Lock Multimedia. And now it's time to talk starting, sitting, sleepers as far as lineups are concerned. I'm joined with Chris James at CJ Florida 9. Follow him on Twitter. He's a great follow, great football mind. Chris, looking at your starting lineup first. Now, last week you had Clyde Edwards-Helaire as a sit, which was smart. This week you have him as a start. Explain why this is the week he wants to get out there on the field. You want him to get out there on the field in your lineup.
Sure. So let's just go to his coach. I feel like Andy Reid might just be good at football and understanding it and game planning. So last week, against a really good run defense that honestly thinks they have a better pass defense than they do, I'm going to throw for 1 million yards in the first quarter. This week, against a run defense that doesn't stop people and what probably won't be the best weather, I'm going to give the ball to my first-round running back. He's going to get all the opportunity. And since he's actually really talented, even though some people might not believe that, he's going to have a really good game. So watch out for Clyde Edwards-Helaire to put up some points and get you in the playoffs or get you that first-round bye.
Hey, let me throw a receiver at you that's on your start as well. Allen Robinson makes sense out of that Bears situation. And I mean, because on paper, they have talent. We talked about Jacksonville earlier, but the Bears are the same way. They got a lot of talent. And Allen Robinson is dealing with the worst luck at quarterback. So why do you have him as a start this week against Detroit?
Because the Bears, even though their quarterback situation is understand one thing that I don't think enough people give credit. The most underrated wide receiver in the NFL since he's been in the league is Allen Robinson. He has played with the likes of Blake Bortles, Mitch Trubisky, Nick Foles. With all due respect to all those guys, they're better than me. But seriously, that's who he's played with. And what does he do? Last week, 2 touchdowns. This is what he does. So he's going to get peppered with targets, and he's going to come down with the ball because that's what Allen Robinson does. And in this Detroit game, since they just let go of their coaching staff, you're going to see them pepper him with more targets.
And in college, he played with Christian Hackenberg. So it's been a rough football life for him as far as guys throwing him the football. We got to go back and see who his high school quarterback was, because maybe that dude actually was pretty doggone good, right?
It was me.
Let's move on to your sitting lineup. And at quarterback is shocking because this guy is coming off of a fantastic week, and that's Deshaun Watson.
Yeah, and it's circumstance. So last week, I knew what they were going to try to do. They were playing Detroit, and they were going to put up big numbers because that's what it was set up to do. This week, it's circumstance-based. Indy had a not-so-great game last week, but I think they're going to scheme well this week against Deshaun Watson and company. Plus, you just lost your number one receiver. We're still seeing if the Brandon Cooks thing will work as the number one receiver. So I just don't think he'll have the requisite pieces to put up really good numbers. Does not mean you sit him. If he's your quarterback on your roster, you're probably going to have to start him, but just have lowered expectations. You might have to take that pop shot like I talked about with a guy like Gabriel Davis, who could put up big points to supplement Deshaun Watson not getting to his projected point total.
All right, now we move on to sleepers. And what's interesting is that we're staying with quarterbacks. You have Mitch Trubisky here as a sleeper. Why?
I have Mitch Trubisky here as a sleeper because, to be honest, every quarterback who is worth their salt has a really good matchup this week. So you're probably playing him. But if you're one of those unlucky few who either plays in a 12-team league or, like myself, has Tom Brady on a bye, you might need someone who can put up points. We've seen Mitchell Trubisky in the past be able to do it. He's athletic. They're going to let him use his legs most likely because, unfortunately, David Montgomery has not been the player that they thought he was going to be. And again, he has Allen Robinson on his team. And one thing that Mitchell Trubisky is smart enough to understand, hey, he's really good. I'm going to throw him the ball, and they can probably put up points against a poor Detroit defense.
Yeah, he's so inconsistent because there was one drive against the Packers. So, okay, he's getting the ball out quick. He's getting the targets. They're moving the football down the field. Then he throws a deep ball into double coverage. You're like, yo, what are you doing, man?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, right?
I try to be nice on shows, so I'm just going to not talk about it.
So we'll take another quick break and be back with more football game plans, NFL All 32.